Welcome back to WNST. And, this is the time of the year when we got March Madness going. If we get local teams in, that's been a little difficult. Sort of that soft underbelly before baseball really gets going. And spring training is a time usually for the rebirth of the hope and the passions of the baseball fan. This guy has been an Oriole fan, I think, since birth. He can clear me up on this. We barely know each other, but we know each other as sort of colleagues in passing over 30 years. Mark Kram Jr. was a longtime sports writer here in Baltimore and then up in Philadelphia for a number of years, award-winning. We've shared many people and stories in common, but now in some sort of semi-retirement writing books on Smoking Joe Frazier up there in Filthy, where they're still running around with cheesesteaks on their heads from that Super Bowl championship a couple weeks ago. Mark Kram joins me again, and, I could call you like author, journalist, sports writer, book author, but like at heart, like the thing that burns in you, which shocks me, is you have had this love of Oriole baseball that sort of never left you, and you haven't had to report on it in 30 years, so you've just been like a fan. You come down here and go to the games,
I dated back to 1963, to tell you the truth. I've been it's been my passion since then. I covered them a few years when I was with the News American, just sort of kind of a backup on the beat, that sort of thing at various times. I was down in spring training in '82 when Cal was coming up, and I was just thinking of that the other day with hearing about Sammy Stewart's death. But you
never made it to Sports First, right? Because that's where I started in '84.
No, I cleared out before they got that thing up and running. So I went to the Detroit Free Press at that point.
When did you leave? How close did we come to you meeting the 15-year-old version of me, which would have changed your life, Kram? Let me tell you that.
Well,
for those people that met me in 1984, they remember me in 2018. Believe me.
Well, if we were ships in the harbor, we would have almost collided. But
when did you leave?
March of '83.
Oh, so like maybe Bill Stecca kind of was covering the Orioles, and at that time Mark Hyman sort of slipped in on that.
Well,
Bernie was just moving around, right?
Yeah, I was I crossed paths with both of those fellas.
Well,
and Bernie Michaelis was a great pal, and we spent a lot of nights on the town together. It was fun. It was a fun time of my life.
Well, and I guess 35 years later, we're still waiting for the next title, right? Like, you left, the Orioles won the World Series and haven't been heard from since. And your passion for the team, and you literally are a stakeholder. You bought season tickets all these years and have been coming down here, right?
Not all these years. Just the last year, I bought a partial plan. I went back, and I hadn't been in a long time. I'd been busy with the Philadelphia sports up here, and so I got out of the newspaper business, and I had some time on my hands and some pension money, and and I put it, invested in the birds, and I tell you, it was fun. It was great to go with friends and to be out there in the sunshine. I always go to day games because I like to be in the sun if I can, but it was just so frustrating. If I have to watch Chris Davis strike out again, I think I'm just going to pull my hair out. The guy was just so clueless last year, and the pitching staff was held together with airplane glue. But I figured, my wife and I talked about, are you going to do it next year? And I said, well, let's see what they do in the off season. Well, they all went on vacation in the off season. It looks like to me. Was anybody working at Camden Yards over the off season?
Not that I'm aware of. No. It is fascinating because people are asking me, and it really is sort of from a journalism standpoint, it's very Willy Wonka. It's very sort of Wizard of Oz. There's no one to ask a question to. There's no accountability. There really never has been in the modern era. I had my press pass taken away 13 years ago, and these charlatans that continue to go over there and cover the team without ever asking a question when the former general manager puts a gun in his mouth and kills himself. There's never been journalism done here in regard to the Orioles. Orioles because, much like the Trumpian world, you get your access taken away and we will belittle you, we will discredit you. All of that has gone on during the course of my lifetime, and now the old man's 89.
He's 89. Is he 89?
Yeah,
wow.
Well, I mean, here's the issue, that there is apparently, we're never going to hear from him again. From all the inside sources I have is that his mind's not there. There's some level of what happens when you're in your late 80s and dementia. And
Right.
I've had 3 human beings, Mark, text me, people that are uniformed employees in the organization, asking me what's going to happen to the team. And I said, you work there. Why are you asking me? And everyone from the inside said there's really sort of no one running it. It's just sort of Dan's running this to the end of the street. Brady Anderson apparently is going to take over, really kind of sort of, if you can believe that. And, Buck and Dan have 6 months left on their deal. And, if they're...
this whole thing is, it's really kind of disturbing, really. This is really shaping up to be a team that's going to be out of the race by about June 15th, if I give them that long. I mean, they're really gambling on a hot start and to sort of be in it by the trading deadline when they can get something for Manny. But it's really been misplayed, the Manny thing, and to have 2 lame duck, a manager and a general manager, lame duck going into a season is just ridiculous. It shows no investment in the future of the team. I just don't understand. They must be having tremendous internal issues in the organization. That's the only thing that I can think of.
Well, Mark Kram Jr. is joining us here. I would just say Oriole fan, but longtime author. You're working on a book on smoking Joe Frazier. Look, man,
biography.
You're still up there in Haddonfield, right? You're
Right.
two red lights from Joe Flacco, literally, and Audubon, right?
Saw him in a deli not long ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, you probably run into Joe Douglas and those guys up there as well. The Eagles thing, paint me through that, Mr. Author and Mr. Longtime Philadelphia sports guy, where, hey, look, the Phillies won. You're still waiting on the Flyers, and God knows, the Lord has been involved in divine intervention to keep that from Philadelphia. And the Sixers have kind of turned it around a little bit. I'm actually going to go see Pat Williams give a speech on Thursday morning talking about 83 and Dr. J and Moses and all that stuff. For the Eagles, I mean, you've lived there 30 years, and they finally did it. What's the aftermath of waiting that long in a place like Philadelphia?
Well, it was like they were given oxygen, for God's sake. I mean, just imagine, they hadn't won a championship since 1960 in football. And it's astonishing. What is that, 52 years, something along that order? It was astonishing, and it was it was a good feeling in town, for a few days. There was a little bit of nonsense the night they won, with tearing down light posts and awnings and tipping cars over, the same stuff you see in most cities these days. But there was a great feeling about the town, and I think it had to do with the kind of guys that won it. They were, the quarterback, Carson Wentz, and Nick Foles, both pretty good guys, and it was just a good team and with a good feeling about it. I'll tell you, I have to pat myself on the back. I'm no football expert, but I thought when Wentz went down, I thought they had a great shot to win with Nick Foles. Everybody in town was, jumping off the bridge when Wentz went down. But I really thought that they had a shot at winning with this guy. I thought that, he had a Pro Bowl year, a few years before, and he got caught in some bad shuffles with some teams. But I thought he had a lot of ability and a lot of poise. So
he threw the ball well, man. Like, watching him throw the football and the confidence level of just delivering the ball where he wanted to throw the football. That's something I watched Blake Bortles play for 3 weeks in January. He can't do it,
And it was such a change for when Donovan McNabb was quarterbacking the team for so long. He was short-arming things all the time. He didn't seem to play with a lot of poise, for a guy that was even a veteran. He didn't seem to, short-arming easy passes and so forth. But Foles, they didn't try to do too much. They sort of stayed within his range of abilities, and he moved the ball downfield. I mean, it was a very professional job by this team. So, hats off to him.
Mark Kram Jr. can be found on the internet at Mark Kram Jr. on Twitter as well as LinkedIn and Facebook and all sorts of places. Maybe sometimes at Camden Yards if the Orioles are to win.
I'll be back. I'm just not going to be invested as much this year as last.
Let me ask you this, from one old fart to another old fart and getting in the car in Philadelphia, coming to a game, what motivates you to go at this point? I mean, I think we're trying to figure this out with the Ravens right now and the knee, which has greatly affected the crowds here. And I know it didn't affect the Eagles crowd because, they won 13 games and won the Super Bowl. So, there is no knee in Philadelphia, even when they're taking a knee. Here it became very easy to get down on the offense, and I don't want to go to the games, and the city's not safe. We've had riots. I live 3 blocks from Camden Yards. We've had a lot of crime in the area, all that goes into it. But for a guy like you that's been to 1 billion baseball games, you have no belief that this team's going to win baseball games this year, none whatsoever. I often wonder what gets someone in a car, and especially what baseball costs these days, to go to a game and spend $100 or $200 at the ballpark at this point.
I know. It was incredibly expensive going down there last year. It was an outing for me, and I hate to boil it down to the fact that I just like the uniform. I like the tradition that the team. I've been following them since I was a kid, and to me, it's great to see a young player like Trey Mancini develop. I really. So I try to focus on, the good in the team. As a fan, as a journalist, I would be focusing on with a more critical eye, I think. But, I'd like to see good things happen to a team I root for. And but last year was they just dragged me through the swamp. I mean, it was...
Well, they've dragged everybody through the swamp. It's just a matter of how much of it you're willing to accept, right? And then the level of expectation that you as a journalist would have had here back in the early 1990s in covering the team and asking what's happening, that's, much like in our government with journalism, that's just gone. No one is here to ask a tough question anymore, Mark.
Let me tell you something. Weaver would not have put up with half of what these guys are getting away with under Buck. He's really is too easy on these guys, too soft on them. Weaver would have had him out of town. He really would have. I mean, that guy, and they responded. They may not have liked him, but they played, and they played at the top of their game.
Well, I think there's a level of expectation, and John Harbaugh always says that's below the bar, right? That's below the line that we set around here for a standard. I don't know that there is a standard right now for the Orioles, or that there's really been one.
No,
and the Machado thing unto itself as a case study of how not to do business with the best baseball player of your generation, how not to handle it from a trade perspective, a contract negotiation, from leveraging the value that you had in him to get 5 prospects for him a year and a half ago if you were going to let him get away. And there's really nobody home to manage all of this, Mark.
I know. You know what? It's almost like by not giving these guys, not extending Duquette and Buck, they're sort of telling they're putting both of them in a position to win this year, but they have no regard for the future of the club. I mean, they'd have been better off if they were building for the future to sort of say, well, look, we're not going to be able to sign Manny as much as we'd like to. And let's sort of discreetly get this thing done to get something back for them. Now they're playing Russian roulette. They're going to come up on the trade deadline, and if he's injured or if he's off his game, like he was last year, he had his bat really sagged the first half of the year. So if they come up with the same situation, they're going to be in big trouble with this guy. So they really blew it as far as, it reminds me of when they brought in Reggie Jackson for a year back in the 70s. They traded Don Baylor, right? Here's a guy who was in tears when he left Baltimore. Great hitter, Don Baylor, right? Guy that come up with their farm system, could have been an Oriole for a long time. So they exchanged him for Reggie. And Reggie, he couldn't wait to get to New York.
Well, and they were going to lose Baylor in free agency anyway, and that was, part of that era of the frustration of watching Doug DeCinces and Reggie Jackson and, all of those players go elsewhere.
I knew they were going to lose Gritch, but I don't remember in my mind what the situation with Baylor was.
Well, I think we were afraid of losing Palmer, right? I mean, that was always a story. He was going to go pitch for the Yankees like Catfish did and all the rest of them did. Palmer never left, though. He always found a way to work it out with Hofberger, right?
But the thing about those teams, when Palmer left the team, he was in tears, or when his career was finished, he was in tears. Those guys love being an Oriole, Who on this club loves being an Oriole? You know?
I don't know. I guess Chris Davis loves it because the check comes every 2 weeks, right?
But I think that's a big part of it, Nestor. I really think it's a part of building a franchise. You got to have guys there that want to be there, and it's just like I'm writing about this Joe Frazier thing now. Right before he fought George Foreman, and George Foreman made the point at the time that he fought Frazier the first time, where he beat him badly in 2 rounds. He said, Joe's only fighting for the money now, and that's not enough. Well, I think that was very astute of Foreman. The truth is, if you're an athlete, you can't just play for the money. You got to have another reason to play. You got to want to be there. You got to want to be excellent. I'll tell you, man, I don't see anybody on that club that really would bat an eye if they were in Cincinnati the next day, or L.A., or San Francisco.
Well, I think Adam Jones has had some affinity for being here, but all he knows is how screwed up it is, and he's clearly on to how screwed up it is because he's on the team now. He's questioned it out loud a handful of times, and, I mean, for crying out loud, they took his pies away because the pie people didn't have a sponsorship for the pies. So, literally, he wasn't allowed to throw pies anymore, so I wasn't a big fan of the pie thing. But
that was way overdone.
They all liked it, and,
let me tell you something else. As a fan that goes, went 13 games last year. Every game is the same program, sort of the between-inning programs and so forth. I can just imagine if you're a season ticket holder and go to 20, 30 games, you must be bored out of your mind watching these gimmicks, and they don't mix it up at all. It's the same music. It's the same routines between innings. It's really, it's just... they're not creative enough, Nestor. That's the problem. They're not creative enough when they're on in-game presentation, and they're certainly not creative enough in building their team.
Mark Kram Jr., joining us here from Philadelphia, author, writer, longtime sports writer in Philadelphia, many, many awards, and a guy that I have stalked here as a Baltimorean and an Oriole fan. Tell me about the Joe Frazier thing real quick and when the book's coming out, and give me the lowdown. I mean, he's been written about. I mean, obviously I watched the HBO stuff and, all of the racial baiting and Molly and Cosell and George Foreman's contributions to all of that, and even seeing all the 68 stuff coming up where, Foreman just marched along to the beat and made millions of dollars. The guys with the fist in the air wound up, never working again for a long period of time. So, here we are 50 years later. It's my 50th birthday this year, and, I'm expecting you to sort of peel back the onion on Frazier in a way haven't been there, right?
That's the whole point, Nestor. This is a deep dive into who he was. All of what you say is true. His name's out there, and we think we know the story. But the truth of the matter is, there was a man beneath all of that, and I think this book, at least where I am so far, I'm almost about 80 or 90,000 words into it, somewhere in that range. It really peels back the onion, as you say, and I think it will be a real revelation to people about who he was, and people that populated his life, and why things happened the way they happened. And I don't think you can write that book until, someone's passed away and you can look back on their life with a little bit of historical perspective. A very successful book on Ali just came out by Jonathan Eig, which is getting a lot of attention. So
I had him on the show. Yeah,
John, and he did a great job with it. And I guess sometime in 2019, we'll sort of get the bookend and get Joe. So hopefully John and I can do some work together, as the various anniversaries of those fights come up. So,
well, you got to Philly in when? 85, 6, 7, somewhere in there?
87, yeah.
87. So, Frazier's last fight, the last comeback that didn't go anywhere was 1981.
82, yeah.
Okay, 82. So you never knew him as a boxer other than as a fan and a guy that probably went in Baltimore to the Towson Center or the Baltimore Civic Center and paid your pay-per-view and watched it and all that, right?
My father, covered him for Sports Illustrated, covered all 3 alley fights, and he was the boxing writer for SI, for 11 or 12 years, from mid-60 to mid-70s. So
did you know Joe as a kid? Did you ever go up and watch him hit the bag when you were a boy or something?
No, I never did that, but I did go. The first pro fight I saw was his second fight against Jerry Quarry when Joe Louis was the referee, and Frazier just ripped Quarry apart again. And but that was the first fight I saw. But Dad brought me up for that to New York, and but as a journalist in Philadelphia, I got to know Joe pretty well. Just being around. I was up the gym now and then, and
well, it's probably easy too with your pop having had that relationship that you weren't a stranger, and you were around him when his mind was sharp. Then, right? I mean, I had him on very late in his life, and he should not have been on the radio with me. I mean, I had one of those. I had him and Chuck Thompson are the only two in 27 years of bringing guests on where when I talked to them, I knew something wasn't right. You know what I mean? Like, we kind of cut that short with Joe a number of years ago because Joe would pick up the phone and talk to you. I mean, he was he did my show many times, but I never really – I met him one time maybe at Michael's 8th Avenue to kind of take a picture or say hello, and I don't even have a copy of the picture, but I remember meeting him briefly once as a high fan thing, but I had him on the air, and but knowing him and then writing a history on him, boy, the complex a character as there is, I would think, right?
Very complex. But the times were really lively times, unless you lived through it, so I really feel like one of my missions in this book is to convey really how lively the era was and the times were and the kind of the world that he came out of. And, I always thought he was a good guy. I always thought that he had a lot of, what's the old expression? He had trouble with, letting Ali go, and it's the old expression, if you don't forgive somebody, it's like swallowing poison and expecting the other person to die, And I think that sums up a little bit about where Joe was in the later years. But you know what? He really he worked with kids up at that gym after his career was over, and he tried to be a good man in the community and as much as he could be. It's a very tough, interesting life. He came out of the worst poverty in America. It was down in Beaufort, South Carolina, back in the 40s and 50s, and disease and all sorts of malnutrition and so forth. He came out of that environment and really made an extraordinary journey in life, So I have high hopes for the book. I think it's going to be really pretty good.
Working title?
Gallant Man.
Gallant Man. All right. Well, we're going to be looking for that. I will be hitting you. Listen, the first day the Orioles are 10 games under 500. All right. Mark Kram Jr. becomes a guest here on the program that day.
Call me when they're 10 games ahead, and then I can eat some crow. I'm rooting for them.
I'm rooting for them, too, and have been since 1972. They don't seem to understand that, but I am rooting for them, if that matters.
Okay. All right, my man.
Appreciate you, Mark. We'll take care, and we look forward to getting that Frazier book in our hands, pal.
All right, pal. Bye-bye.
You got it. Mark Kram Jr. from Philadelphia, author, Baltimorean, and Oriole fan, and doing the book on Joe Frazier as well. You can find him at Mark Kram Jr. out on the web. You can find me anywhere the internet is sold. TheBuyAToyota.com. Audio Vault there for you 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. You can download podcasts, listen when you want, where you want, how you want. It's TheBuyAToyota.com Audio Vault. Last but never least, all of our breaking news comes to you first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford Security Boulevard. Dennis Kolatzos will be here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST, and you get all that breaking news first. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.